Okay, should we keep going? Do you want to get your stick, Banjo? Yeah, you bring it. Bring the stick. Come on. Yeah, I just say bringing it. Come on. Come on, bring it. Right, we're heading this way. So, good morning. This is oh, here he comes. There we go. Very impressive stick. Now Luna will probably torment him by trying to take it from him. Yep. This is the fun we have every morning. So hopefully you can hear me clearly as I'm kind of talking with all the dog barking going on around me. I'll turn this around so you can see me a little bit now, and you can see. Oh, hang on, it's not. There we go. So you can see I'm looking quite smug again this morning. I was saying being smug the other day, but today I'm feeling a little bit smug. I'm just losing one of the leads from my pocket here, because I found out this morning. It's just the miracles of the way in which kind of there he goes behind me. Miracles of the way that things like YouTube work. You know, when you go on YouTube, is it popped up a little video for me. And it was about American flags, which I thought that's an odd one to look at. But I watched it and discovered that the very oldest surviving flag from any part of the United States is actually called the Forster flag. Dates from 1775, comes from Massachusetts. That's a year before independence is declared. And so I feel like now, if I could get out to the States, I've probably got a legal claim on a piece of land in Massachusetts. Probably worth quite a bit now. So I'm going to live my day in the fantasy of some sort of inheritance I don't really have. But it kind of got me thinking a little bit of an image that I used to use quite a lot when I talk about the difference between Christianity as a faith and Christianity as a religion, which is that a faith is about the followership, following. And to follow, if you want people to follow, you have to raise a standard and you raise a flag, and people can gather to it. Whereas religion really is about putting walls in place. And are people either in or are they out? And it's a subtle kind of a distinction. Well, I say it's subtle, it's not that subtle, but what I mean is, I suppose, is we easily flip between the two. I mean, it's very, very easy to kind of go online and see someone raises a perfectly kind of straightforward question, and suddenly it degenerates into issues of those who are in and those who are out. So the other day I noticed... Be quiet, Banjo. I've got him too excited with the big stick. But anyway, the other day a simple kind of question came up. I noticed on Facebook as to whether it's okay to, if you're were you truly saved if you didn't believe in a literal Adam and an Eve. You see, so I'm not commenting on the question at all. But it was just interesting how quickly people kind of highlighted, well, it's not really to do with salvation, but. There's always the but, who's in, who's out. And then arguments get quite heated by people taking different positions and so on. And it's not that the question is irrelevant. I think, though, Jesus gives an example of something similar. When he's towards the end of his ministry, he's leaving the temple and they see the man who's been born blind. And the disciples start to ask a theological question. It's kind of who's right, who's wrong on this theological point. And they say, so who sinned, this person or his parents? And of course, anyone who's involved in sort of inner healing ministries and so on know that these aren't totally irrelevant questions. Sometimes they are a key to unlocking healing. So it's not that there's an irrelevance to the question, but Jesus' response, which sadly is lost in so many English translations, is actually really about the moment, because followership is about the moment. And what's key at the moment? And so Jesus responds. He says, neither. Now, is that true? Actually, the truth is both this man has sinned and so have his parents. So neither really means this is not the question to be asking. And then he says, but so that the glory of God can be revealed. And English translations not only put a full stop there, they also put a verse break. But there's no verse breaks or full stops in the Greek. We should just read on through. So really what they're saying is neither this person sinned nor his parents. God made him sick so I could turn up and heal him. But actually, if you read through, it makes a much more gracious and lovely sense. Jesus says, neither, but that the glory of God might be revealed, let us do the works of him who sent us while it's still day. And the context here is, as Jesus is leaving, it's going to become very difficult for him at this point ever to come back to the temple. He has upset people too much. He does come back, at least one more time, but he kind of shoots in and shoots out. It's a tricky situation. The opportunity to do something for this man is disappearing as we walk out of this door. It's never going to be here again, and right now you're asking totally irrelevant questions and saying, are you on this side of it or on that side of it? Are you in or are you out? And I look at my own journey of faith and walking with the Lord, and if I was defined in my salvation by believing the right things, I can't tell you at what point in my Christian career I was actually saved, because I've believed different things at different times, and it's been part of the journey, part of the exploration with the Lord, part of opening the Bible, reading something I find really difficult, arguing with the Lord about it, letting my spirit be changed, coming back some years later and finding I've got a slightly different perspective in my own heart, but actually I now read with more intelligence the context of the verse I've read, and things start to resolve, and actually the journey is, my faith is not defined by being inside the wall or outside the wall. It's how I process it, how I follow it. And in that context, flags are really important, because I believe in churches that what we're supposed to do is raise up a standard. We're supposed to raise a standard that people can gather to. And so things, for me, just a personal view, kind of things like church memberships are often a bit irrelevant, because my experience of them is that when somebody falls foul of the rules of church membership, they just leave, or it doesn't matter to them. But if they feel you're falling foul of the commitment you've made to them for being a member, they really milk it. So I think an awful lot of churches would avoid an awful lot of stress if you actually kind of removed that and got hold of something a lot kind of simpler. You took on an approach of, do you feel committed to this kind of community of people as we try and follow Jesus together? And different people within that community will be at different places. And I'm not therefore advocating a total free-for-all for the church, because there is truth. I'm not someone who doesn't believe in truth and therefore anything goes. I'm advocating for a position which is, when we are a pursuit of Jesus. He said, go and make disciples, not members. And just final kind of thoughts on this sort of issues is, you see, one of the things about a standard is it kind of it receives its authority from those who kind of have the right attitude towards it, who look towards it in the right kind of a way. And so you can actually be quite a distance, but you can see the standard. And as I'm stand here at a distance, I'm looking at some trees in the far distance. Maybe I'll turn this around, you can have a look at what I'm looking at. So I look at those trees in the distance, and I can be a great big distance away. I can't see the detail. I don't understand exactly every twist and turn, but I know that's somewhere I want to head. And so there will be people who often seem far away from Jesus, but actually from a distance we may never even realise that what we're doing is reaching them, as we raise up a standard that is attractive to them. They turn their eyes towards it. And if you came and gave them a questionnaire and said, can you tell me this and this about the tree, they wouldn't be able to answer it. They just know it looks like a good place to be heading. And so they orientate themselves towards the standard, they start walking towards it. You can, on the other hand, you can have people who've been right up close to the tree for years who actually never turn around to look at it. And the truth is, the reality is, I grew up in a kind of Christian home. I say a kind of Christian home. It was a very nice Christian home, just in case anyone who knows my parents and sisters and so on is watching. It was all very good. I grew up in a good Christian home. But as a result, I know that as I grew up, there were times when I could really fake it. I could kind of fake or faith. There was no problem. I could flip between the two, because I knew enough about the tree. I'd been close enough to it that I could do it in the flesh, but without ever having to really turn around and look at it. And actually, if I'm really honest, I go through those processes every week. There are times during the week when I ought to be orientating myself towards the Lord, getting his perspective on things and asking him, but I'm just not. Now, I'm not advocating a kind of a sort of a manic kind of approach, where every kind of, do I eat this chocolate biscuit or not? I'm not talking about things like that. I have sadly met people with kind of slight mental health issues who almost get like that. When they take the verse that Jesus only did what the Father showed him or told him, only said what the Father's speaking, and kind of almost don't do anything. That's not the case. We are supposed to become something. We are something in Christ. We're not just nothing. And so there is something that we do out of our natural instincts and our natural gifts. But we all know that there are those moments where in reality there's that kind of prompting of the Spirit that I need to turn around and just kind of get that perspective and see, what does it say to my faith if I turn and listen to Jesus right now? And we ignore them. We do them in our own wisdom. And sometimes it's just because we're lazy, and sometimes it's because we sort of know that he's not going to come up with the same answer that we are. And so we kind of fake it to ourselves that there's another reason why I'm not asking the question. So what's all the point of that? I suppose really my heart in kind of sharing the moment, because I do try and do these things prompted by things that are happening during the day, thoughts that kind of hit me in the morning. As I say, I discovered the Forster flag, which can make a claim to being the oldest American flag, and made me think about this whole issue of the standards that we raise up. And I suppose my hope is, and I want to come better at this, is that there are great opportunities that we get where we do get an opportunity to raise the standard of Jesus, to raise the question. And it's not always our job to kind of draw the line and say, well, because you've now taken on this much, you're now in and you're out. But just to notice to those whose eyes are drawn towards the standard we're raising. I think if we notice that, we would actually realise there are far more people far more impressed by Jesus than we realise. And who am I to judge where that being impressed by him starts to shift into a place where they're beginning to follow? Maybe they don't follow with all of the knowledge or all of the belief in things like the Trinity and so on that I might have because I've been up close to the tree so long. But they can see from a distance it is worth heading towards. And in small, quiet, subtle ways, they start to work their way until they're ready to kind of say, yeah, I don't know what it is, but I do feel like I'm a follower of Jesus. It's interesting to note that way back in the 90s when I was involved very much in the 82,000 movement, it was a World Mission Alliance, how many conservative evangelical networks, and I'm using that word in a kind of broad sense, but in other words, thoroughly safe, thoroughly sensible missions agencies would refer to themselves as followers of Jesus rather than Christians. Because they found it opened more doors and made Jesus more attractive. And it also put the reality on the table. It's not about kind of reading through a checklist of terms and conditions and ticking the box at the end and proceeding to the next screen. It's actually about, in a day-to-day way, turning around, seeing where is the standard, where is it heading. As Jesus passes through a town, there are those who are never going to move from the town, but Jesus is where they are today, and they can feel like they're good Christians. But there are those who are willing to kind of put their shoes on and get walking and follow where he goes. Sometimes he takes you places you didn't expect. I don't just mean that in terms of physical places like the missions fields, but I mean in terms of mental spaces. How many times have I held a principle, and as I sat pastorally with someone and dealing with them in a kind of compassionate way, you find that actually the humanity of the person starts to outweigh, if you like, the logic of truth. It's not that the truth is not truth, but one of the most important truths is that the person has humanity and is made in the image of God. And so these things kind of shift you, and you realise actually I can have grace because I don't have those rules. It's not that I don't believe in truth, but I've not drawn a line with it and said you're in, you're out. In many ways, Paul says the same in Romans 10. It's not for us to say who goes up, because that brings Christ down. It's not for us to say who's going down, because that kind of denies the resurrection, or whatever, how he puts it. I'm not quoting it properly, perfectly. But actually, we kind of very easy to kind of say who's in, who's out, and draw our assumptions and treat people in those ways. Our job is not to do that. Ours is to kind of raise the standard of Jesus, who's a place of love, who recognises people's humanity, who sees the journey they're on, and calls them to it unequivocally. To the rich man, sell everything you've got and follow me. That's a tough thing. He doesn't say it to everybody, but he says it to the person who needs it. And there will be those times where the person who seems to have the trivial thing, if I become a Christian, do I have to get rid of this tattoo on my knuckles? I remember a friend of mine that used to work in youth evangelism always used to say, whenever that question is asked, I always say yes. He said, not because I really think yes, but because if that's going to be the reason why people don't want to follow, they need to know up front. Everything has to be open. Whatever you think, however important it is to you, think it is, it's not necessarily that puts you in or out, but it needs to be put into the context of, am I going to follow Jesus today? And if he leads in a particular way, if he takes me in a particular place, am I really willing to go? I seem to be kind of recycling around the same idea here, because I suppose one of my observations in the whole mix is that very often it's kind of easier for it's easier. Oh, be quiet, banjo. It's easier for those who have been near the tree for a long time, who've been Christians for a long time, to kind of feel they know where the rules are and kind of step into that mode of doing things. And so we're the ones that need to hear it most regularly. The flip side is, of course, there's this kind of whole move which people often use euphemistically with this idea of progressive Christianity. And the funny thing is, there's an awful lot that goes with it that I've been living by years, but there's also a lot in it that is actually just about, I'm not looking at the tree either, it's just anything goes. There is no standard, we're all in the same place, there are no walls, there are no standards. No, that's not the case.